this is a first-time visit. And then for some of Alejandro's team, this is also a first-time visit. This is the Jose Vivaldi Aviary within the Río Abajo State Forest. And it's one of only 2 captive breeding facilities for the Puerto Rican parrot found in all of Puerto Rico. And it is also the site of only 1 of 3 existing wild populations of the species. And we're proud to have the largest flock of Puerto Rican parrots in the wild. Currently, we estimate that our flock population is over 200 individuals strong. And we're right in the middle of the breeding season, so this is a time of the year when the magic happens. This is when we make the babies. This is when we really see all of our efforts pay off.
Okay.
Incubation room, food storage, hospital, nursery, and all that jazz. Kitchen, all that will be here. And then this part here will continue to be the workshop. Do you see some of the guys?
Yeah, 2
Oh yeah, aren't they cute?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of buildings. Let's go see some birds.
Nice.
Like a lot of this money was assigned after Hurricane Maria. So we had a lot of funding that was supposed to make the facility a lot more hurricane resilient, because the last time anyone really invested in this facility was in the 1990s. So this is an upgrade that's been a long time coming. El programa es tenerlas en cautiverio, reproducirlas y liberarlas. Y hay algunas aves que sí permanecen en cautiverio toda su vida porque son valiosas genéticamente y son parte del programa de reproducción en cautiverio y continúan produciendo pichones, que eventualmente esos son los que se liberan. Ana y Pepe son la pareja más vieja que tenemos en cautiverio. Ellos nacieron en el 97 y entonces fueron parte del programa de reproducción en cautiverio muchos años. Entonces ahora ya están retiradas porque ya no producen huevos fértiles y tampoco crían pichones, pero entonces están básicamente permanentemente en cautiverio porque ya a esta edad no se podrían liberar exitosamente. So that's not really active, super active, like there's not a lot of investment in services. Yeah.
So if you had some for display, it would just be for people who happen to be
So this is where the magic happens, because this is the bonding bed cage. So it's you can see that all of the birds have individual dog tags, and that's what we use to differentiate, because otherwise we really can't read the color bands or the numbers on the bands from here. And then we will put the birds here in a socialized setting and allow them to exhibit normal natural mate choice behavior. And then we will come in and take a look at who's showing that pair behavior. And then we will look in PopLink and we'll see whether or not they're compatible. Without the mate RX, we'll just make sure that they at least do not have grandparents in common, and then we're like, okay, that's good enough, and then we'll put them together. So if they do pair with a close cousin or relative, then we'll remove one member of the pair and put the other one in a separate cage. But basically, yeah, this is the Puerto Rican Parrot nightclub. El macho más longevo puede que haya vivido hasta los 40 años.
Ay, qué bello.
Pero en general el promedio es alrededor de 15, 17. Sumamente inteligentes, son bien sociables, se aparean de por vida.
Ok.
Usualmente. como que algún tipo de examen físico, tal vez las movemos para acá para poder manipularlas más fácilmente, o tal vez si estamos limpiando un área y necesitamos como que... Pero en general el cuarto huracán no se utiliza menos que un huracán, porque cuando viene el huracán toda la población cautiva la replicamos de todas las distintas jaulas en el aviario y las ponemos en todas estas jaulas a un lugar que quede en concreto y que si le cae un árbol encima no se va a romper y no va a causar un escape de las aves. Y entonces durante los huracanes el personal tiene que estar aquí y pernoctar aquí para poder proveerle nido a todas ellas.
Wow.
Tenemos alrededor de 160.
Bello.
Queríamos un poquito más, pero de cada tanto trasladamos algunas para el aviario de Maricao.
Ok.
Y algunas las podemos trasladar al aviario del Yunque, y eso lo hicimos hace poquito.
Ok.
Algunas ellas las cogen para reproducción, otras para liberación. Por ejemplo, en el caso de Maricao, que solamente es un aviario de liberación, pues todas irían a liberarse. Pero en el Yunque, puede que varias de esas pues sean nuevas para reproducción.
Ok.
Muchas de ellas son chiquitas todavía, a lo mejor no ahora que las se ponen a reproducir, pero porque muchas eran del año pasado, bebés del año pasado o del antipasado, así que probablemente ahora mismo no las pongan en pareja, pero eventualmente algunas sí podrían.
Donde en ciertas épocas del año hacemos las liberaciones de cotorra. Ahora mismo estamos en temporada reproductiva, así que ahora mismo no vamos a estar liberando, pero este grupito de pájaros eventualmente lo vamos a estar traslocando para el lado de allá, y entonces ellos serían candidatos a liberación.
¿Qué determina cuándo?
Los candidatos a liberación en base a la genética, y de eso te pueden hablar más las de Lincoln, pero básicamente hay ciertos pájaros en el programa que genéticamente son más valiosos y con esos tú te quedas. Entonces todo lo demás tú lo liberas. Entonces con lo que te quedas lo continúas reproduciendo para aumentar la presencia de esos genes en la población.
Y lo otro es depredadores aquí que ellas tengan.
El guaraguao de cola roja y el guaraguao de bosque son dos aves rapaces bastante comunes en esta área que sí se las pueden depredar. En la etapa de nido, la boa puertorriqueña también se puede llevar huevos y pichones. También las ratas pueden invadir los nidos y matar huevos y pichones. Los especies invasivas como los gatos, las mangostas, cualquier animal feral no nativo puede ser una amenaza, especialmente para los pichones, porque los pichones una vez vuelan del nido, a veces en su primer intento de vuelo caen al piso y entonces se tardan un rato en lo que logran subir de nuevo. Y si en ese momento los coge una mangosta o un gato,
Y de todos esos que hay por aquí.
Por aquí los rapaces, bien comunes, el guaraguao, tanto el cola roja como el guaraguao de bosque, y un montón de boas puertorriqueñas.
Ok, gracias.
Pero probablemente no te vas a encontrar con una dando vueltas por ahí. Tienes que pasar bastante tiempo a estar mirando debajo de piedras.
My name is Lisa Faust. I'm from Lincoln Park Zoo and a conservation scientist there. And our zoo has been working for about 14 years with the Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program. It started with a connection that came from another parrot research scientist who kind of recognized that we could help the parrot program build a stud book database. So build the records and the record keeping system that they needed to keep track of the population and then to make good decisions about the genetics of the population and the demographics of the population. So that's some science that we at the zoo specialize in. And so we've been involved for about 14 years helping them maintain their records in their database, helping train new people as they're getting new people coming on the program so that they can use those data and know how many individuals are in the population, how it's grown over time. And then part of the goal of that is to do the best that we can genetically for the population so that we can avoid breeding close relatives together and avoid inbreeding depression, which is really a problem for small populations. So this species, we don't see evidence for inbreeding depression necessarily, but it's just good conservation management practice that we try and avoid making inbred individuals, because if there's too much inbreeding in a population, they can start to see problems with reproduction, they can start to see problems with chick survival, and then also it just reduces the amount of genetic variation for when they go back out in the wild and they come against new threats or new diseases or new challenges in their ecosystem. They need all that genetic diversity they can, and so our goal working with the program is to try and help in the aviaries maintain the highest amount of genetic diversity that we can.
So how did it start and how is it going?
So this is a species where, they were down to, less than 20 birds in the wild and decided to captive breed. And they've actually been able to breed a lot of individuals. There's a large population in captivity now, and a lot of individuals in the wild. It's a very successful reintroduction program, especially in comparison to a lot of the other conservation programs that I've worked with. So it's definitely a hopeful story when we come and work down on this project. In terms of our collaboration with them, before we got support and assistance from Integro Foundation, we didn't have a lot of information that was able to help us trace what the population's pedigree was back from the original animals down to what we had right now. So our genetic recommendations were very, very rough. And we knew that we could use newer techniques. So with the funding that the foundation provided, we were able to do the molecular genetic analysis, the lab analysis, using blood samples. We collected blood from about 86 birds and did genomic sequencing, kind of cutting edge science that allows us to know the relationships of all the birds in the aviary to each other. And that's going to help us now going forward really better maintain the genetic health of the population and avoid the inbreeding depression that we know we don't want to have creep in.
What have you learned or discovered in the process?
We know a lot more now that what we have in each aviary and what we have in the wild populations, we kind of have the same genetic material and the same genetic health. We've done a fairly good job of maintaining that genetic diversity and have some opportunities moving forward to do a little bit better. We've also been able to do some computer modeling called a population viability analysis that really helps us project out 50 years or 100 years to say what's going to happen in the future for this population. And we've been using those analyses to try and better plan recovery for the species moving forward. So we've been able to kind of fine-tune both the type of data that we need from the wild populations, but also where we want to go in the future.
When you're looking at the genetic match, what are the factors that you're looking at?
What we think about when we're working with a conservation program like this is that we're thinking about the genetics of it and thinking about that and when we're making pairing decisions, but we are also thinking about other priorities for the program. So for something like a reintroduction program, often the biggest priority is just to make as many pairs as we can and to have a lot of hatches and a lot of successful chicks that we can get out into the wild and that we can release. And so sometimes there's trade-offs that we make between genetics and demographics to make sure that we're getting enough birds and really getting them out into the wild. But when we have the luxury of making and fine-tuning some decisions, so what we do with the molecular genetic information once we get it is we try and look at all the relationships between the individual animals, the males and the females, and we try and make the best genetic matches that we can and try and avoid inbreeding and creating chicks that have higher rates of inbreeding. And what the molecular project enabled us to do was to get the population to where we know about 80% of their kinships and their relationships to each other. We're going to continue to do a little bit more sequencing and get that up to 100%, so that going forward we're going to be able to very carefully say, what are the best individuals to put together in the aviaries? What are the best individuals to hold back from the releases, so we make sure we keep a good amount of genetic diversity in the aviaries? And then what are the best individuals where they may not have bred and we want to really focus in on breeding them? And maybe that's doing some additional reproductive assessments or looking at them more closely to make sure they're with the perfect pair to see if we can capture their genetics for the population.
Challenges. What are the main challenges you're currently facing?
I think the challenges for the Puerto Rican parrot, what we've seen from the population modeling is that, and the analysis that we've done, is that the different wild populations are at very different stages. The Río Abajo population right here is growing quickly and growing strongly, and we're hopeful that it's kind of at the tipping point where if you had to reduce the number of birds that you put out into the wild, that its birth rates are strong enough and its mortality rates are low enough that it would actually get to sustain itself. And that's the goal for all of these programs, is to not release birds forever, but to really get them on their feet and let them go. For the other populations, they're still getting established, or they have either less reproduction or higher mortality. And so I think the challenge for the program is trying to better understand the conditions that make a population in the wild successful, see if we can get all of those multiple populations to a stable or growing population. And it's very important for a species where we know that something like a hurricane could come through and really affect one subpopulation. We need to have multiple strong populations so that they can bounce back as a species as a whole.
Once you're done with the sampling and the project, what's next?
So once we finish and fully sample the molecular genetics, we will really have kind of the perfect information that we need to help the program make good decisions. So we will come back on an annual basis. We'll keep working with them to help maintain their data. And then we will basically fine-tune the mate choice selections that the parrots make. We'll look at those with the genetic information in hand and say, that's a great pair, you guys did a great job picking each other, stick together, or perhaps we should break you up and see if we can pair you with another individual for kind of fine-tuning those genetic results. But it's going to give us a lot of valuable information for our regular ongoing management that we need to just keep doing until the point where the species is recovered and they don't need all of the captive breeding advising that we've been doing for a long time.
For those of us who aren't conservation scientists or experts, how can we support parrot conservation and efforts here?
Yeah, I think that people are always so excited to hear about these projects and always want something very concrete to do. And often it's some of the environmental choices that you're making every day, and especially the way that you're voting and supporting and looking for candidates that are supporting wildlife conservation and climate change, smart climate change policy and all of those things. You can also look for organizations that are really directly doing work in the field and support them, because they kind of are the experts who are going out and often need resources to get the work done. But I also think that if you get excited about the conservation story of the Puerto Rican parrot, getting out in nature and being able to see them, talking to people about them, there's a lot of people who are very disconnected from wildlife, from nature, from hiking, from enjoying the forest. And I think the more that we can kind of show that excitement of the cool stories that happen, on an island like Puerto Rico, I think the better to kind of get the next generation of conservation ambassadors out there.
The Puerto Rican parrot is a critically endangered species of parrot that's endemic only to the island of Puerto Rico. And it's been the focus of a captive breeding and release program since around the 1970s. Currently there are 2 captive breeding facilities. This is one of only 2 captive breeding facilities in all of Puerto Rico. The other facility is at El Yunque National Forest, and this is the Jose Vivaldi Aviary. So the Puerto Rican parrot suffered massive population declines as a result of deforestation that occurred in Puerto Rico. There are so few left in the world. Probably before European colonization of the island of Puerto Rico, it's estimated that there might have been over 1 million parrots. But then by the 1940s, the population had decreased to just around 2,000 parrots, and all of them were restricted to what would eventually be the Yunque National Forest and the Luquillo mountain range. Then by the 1950s, just 10 years later, the first study of the species was conducted, and at this point, scientists were able to determine that not only was the species severely threatened, but it had now been reduced to just around 200 parrots in the wild. Fast forward to the 1970s, and at this point things has gotten really, really bad. They were down to around 13 in the wild, and that was the lowest population number that the species reached in the wild. At this point, it was very clear to all of the scientists working with the species that some really drastic measures were going to need to be taken, or we would risk losing the species forever. So in 1973, the first captive breeding program was established in the El Yunque National Forest, and the first captive population sprang up as a result of all of that captive breeding. Eggs and chicks were harvested from the few remaining wild nests. A few birds were transferred from a local zoo, and then little by little, the population continued to grow in captivity. Then by the 1990s, it was pretty clear that we would need more than just one captive breeding facility. We would need more than one population, because it was important to have a secondary population in the event of any catastrophic events, like a disease outbreak or a hurricane. And that's why in 1993, this facility, the Jose Vivaldi Aviary, was established, and it became the second captive breeding facility for the endangered Puerto Rican parrots. Then in 2006, aviary population numbers had increased sufficiently to allow us to start releasing birds into the wild. And so in 2006, we conducted the first release of Puerto Rican parrots. And then there have pretty much been subsequent releases here at Río Abajo Forest ever since. And today we have the largest population of Puerto Rican parrots in the wild. It numbers over 200 individuals at this point, and we're currently in the middle of the Puerto Rican parrot breeding season, where we're hoping to see continued population growth towards the end.
And then, so that was up until 06. Then fast forward to 2017 when Hurricane Maria came. What happened then?
So in 2017, the Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program had really reached a high point in terms of conservation. We had 2 captive breeding facilities. We had 2 wild populations, one in Río Abajo State Forest and one in El Yunque National Forest. And we had initiated efforts to reintroduce a 3rd wild population in the Maricao State Forest. Unfortunately, 2017 was also the year that Hurricane Maria struck, and it was a devastating blow for the entire conservation program. We estimate that between all of the wild populations, we lost around 60% of all of the birds in the wild. Here in Río Abajo State Forest, we lost around 40% of our wild flock. Fortunately, our captive populations, because we were able to move them to our secure hurricane shelters, they were safe during the storm. So although the facility and the structures and the buildings and some of the cages did suffer damages, none of our birds in captivity were lost as a result of the storm. And as a result, we were able to continue our efforts in the following years to continue to breed and release parrots into the wild.